Insight and awareness, spiritual explorer. Soul intuitive, emotional and spiritual mentor and award-winning author, Lorraine Nilon.
Welcome, explorers. I'm your host, Lorraine Nilon, and our guest today is Kris Ashley, and her book is called Change Your Mind, Change Your Reality. I'd love to know why you wrote this book and what it's all about, Kris.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Lorraine. It's such an honor to be on your podcast. Thank you to all the listeners. So I can start with telling you a little bit about my journey, what led to my spiritual awakening, and that kind of prompted the book, if that would be helpful.
Yeah,
Sure.
definitely.
So like so many people who are healers or who are on the spiritual path, I went through quite a bit of trauma when I was younger and found spirituality, and that helped me really heal. So when I was 12 years old, I was a victim of sexual abuse at the hands of a family member. And I had a really large, tight-knit, extended family. We did everything together. We sang every time we were around each other. And when that family found out what happened, the family just split down the middle. So family members who had been like a second mother to me told me they no longer loved me and I wasn't their family anymore. And holidays became divided. You know, the family of my abuser would take the mornings and we would take the afternoons, we being my parents and I. And so this just really completely tore me up. I had cousins who had been my best friends that I wasn't permitted to see anymore. And it left me with severe PTSD, all of these negative emotions like anger and guilt that I didn't know how to cope with as a young adolescent. And I turned to self-harming behaviors, I turned to drugs, and I just turned to anything that would just numb this pain that I was feeling. And my life changed when someone handed me a book when I was 17 years old. It was called The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life. I don't know if you've read it or not.
No, I haven't.
Okay, it's a good one. So someone handed me that book, and I just remember going through the pages and thinking, wow, this feels like the truth. And it was almost like I was a sleeper agent, and just something inside of me woke up. And when I finished that book, I started reaching for more. And I started reading every spiritual, metaphysical, quantum physics, reincarnation, meditation, personal development book I could get my hands on.
And when you were in that state, what do you think those books gave you? What did they really give you? Because you're going to have, when you're in the, when you've had an experience like that, plus then on top of it, you've had the family split. Do you know what I mean? So then all the most victims take all the responsibility of that on, like I'm the cause of that. Not that it's true. Yeah. But that, you know what I mean? Did you go through that? What were you going through emotionally at that time that these books were helping you with?
So I had a ton of guilt. And the second part of the story that I'm going to get to, I'll explain even more about that guilt.
Okay.
But I had a lot of guilt and I had a lot of anger. And I felt like I had destroyed my family. And I remember the first time when I was reading that first book, what it did for me was it showed me that there was another way of viewing this world that we live in. There was another way of moving through life. There was another way of having a different perception, a different lens, and a different belief system. And it just opened up all of these possibilities. It made me realize that the reality that we see around us is a little bit of an illusion sometimes. And it just showed me that this hole that I was in wasn't the only thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. And there's a big difference in there. I'm actually looking at, we have a belief system and then there's reality, and the space in the middle we feel. Yeah. And that's where we throw all our unresolved emotions in there. We throw all our fears, and then we start believing that is reality. But we've changed the filter because we're unable, or at times the emotions are so strong for us that we're not sure how to deal with reality. And if our belief, like if your belief is, especially for abuse victims and any type of abuse I'm talking about, it can be just even friendships falling apart and things like that. The thing that shocks us the most is that our belief is these people love us, they would never hurt us, and all of a sudden reality, and especially that kind of abuse, you can't really skip around that reality. So you have that middle ground where you don't know how to fill it. So that, to me, that's where the books are important, because it helps you find a space and a stepping stone to walk from your beliefs, which, you know, like even you feeling guilt at that time, that's a belief you were creating out of your hurt and confusion. And then that can sustain a space where your books might have intercepted and went, hang on, maybe this isn't the real belief. Maybe this is taking me away from reality, and instead of letting me find reality that works for me. I know that sounds like we're conjuring it up, but it's like, take away all those perceptions.
Yeah, and I think you totally nailed it when you were talking about, oh, we can imagine all these people love us, and then it's like earth shattering, right? When someone you loved and trusted, especially as like a young child or a young adolescent, all of a sudden on a dime can just, no, you're nothing to me anymore. And I like that you were talking about how guilt is your own perception, because guilt is a low frequency vibration, right? It's us taking the blame before and punishing ourselves before anyone else can punish us, right? Because we think that we've done something wrong. So oftentimes when we feel guilty, we think we're going to get punished by our parents, our teachers, our bosses, the lawmakers, God, whoever. And so we punish ourselves as this way of kind of like pre-punishing. But oftentimes there's no other punishment coming, right? It's all in our minds, and we're just doing it to ourselves.
Exactly. And the other thing is that it's so overwhelming. So the victim starts backtracking of how they could have stopped it, how they could have changed this event. And there's never, they can't, because they didn't see it coming. So they're trying to find answers. So if I hear from clients, I remember one going, I was wearing pajamas and I think she was 7. And I was like, that is not the reason. That is not why you got abused. But in her little head, that's what she tracked back to, because you're trying to work out, because you don't want it to happen again. So you're trying to work out where did I go wrong that this happened to me, which is faulty thinking, but it's a shock response. And then the guilt and all that, and the fear of not being good enough, and I'm unworthy, and when you hit with another layer of indifference, so for every person in your family that reacted with, let's say, a little bit of nastiness or how dare you, that's another load of indifference that's coming at you. So you're getting that reaffirmed, so it holds the victim, unfortunately, in that space in between their belief that's been shattered and reality. And we never know what to do when we're held in there too long.
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't matter how old we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when my grandpa passed away, I was standing outside with one of my aunts, and we were talking about the funeral coming up, and I was like, oh, are we going to take shifts? Because that was my reality, right? Like our family took the morning, and she was like, stop it, Kris, don't make this about you. And it was like, oh God, like, people are still, and, I'm sure she didn't mean anything by it. Her and I have a good relationship now, but that stuck with me, right? Because it's like, I didn't know any better.
And it reaffirms there's something wrong. You're in the way of this running smoothly. And unfortunately, the whistleblowers and the victims, that's how some families and, organizations and all those kind of things, that's how they can react. You're in the way of this running smoothly and us not being confronted with the reality, which is 10 times worse for the victim and the whistleblowers.
I think that just speaks to how everyone, again, has this reality, right? People's reality is like, oh, everything is beautiful. Everything is fine. This should run smoothly. Why are you ruining this, right? And it's like, hey, there's a very different reality happening over here.
So I love that the books that you were reading were intercepting that space and giving you something to at least explore.
Yeah, and it really just became this obsession. And I it was like my life's mission, this purpose that drove me onward. And the second part of that story is, as I began to change my mind about the nature of reality and about the world around me and get better, my mother began to get worse. So her family had been ripped down the seams, and she didn't have those books, right? She didn't ever really deal with it. She didn't really allow herself to feel it because she didn't know, right? She didn't know any better. And it started to manifest as illness. And she started to get very serious illnesses and also very strange afflictions that we had never even heard of and doctors couldn't even describe. So they started prescribing her pills, and then they gave her pills for the side effects of those pills. And then at the height of it, she was on a fentanyl patch. She was taking about 11 different pills every day. And then she slept for all but a few hours of daylight. She nodded off at the dinner table. She fell down all the time. I remember this one time we had this amazing conversation where I told her all the things that I had been like really feeling, and she received them in the way I wanted her to. And I was like, yes, we had this connection finally. And then the next day she just didn't even remember it. And this lasted almost 15 years. So the guilt compounded because I was feeling so guilty that not only had I destroyed my family, but I had broken my mother. But I like to say that in the end, my mother was my biggest teacher, because for every step she took deeper into depression and illness, I climbed hand over hand in the other direction, right out of that tunnel, because I saw what happens to a human body and spirit when they choose that path. And then I was seeing what was happening to my own body and spirit as I was changing my mind about everything, as I was reading, as I was putting into practice everything I was reading. And I really made a promise to myself that I would always prioritize my physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health, and I would do everything I could to heal. And it's a promise I've kept to myself to this day. It's the reason I am the way I am. So I'm grateful to my mother for that.
Yeah, it's hard to watch, isn't it? It's really hard to watch. Out of curiosity, where do you sit with your guilt now? How do you feel about guilt now?
I think, like I was saying before, I realized that it's a way of punishing ourselves. And every once in a while something will come up and I'll be like, oh, is this why I am the way I am? But no, I've done a lot of healing work. I've studied under so many teachers. I try everything. I go to every workshop, every seminar, every retreat. I try every healing modality because I don't think that learning and growth is ever over. I'm still reading every book I can get my hands on, and there's always deeper layers to unpeel, right? It's never over, right? It's never over. And of course there's still some things there that I fall back into, but no, I've come quite a long way. And it's to the point where, like, talking about it is not triggering. Seeing those people in passing at a family event isn't triggering.
So out of curiosity, has any of those family members come back and gone, I'm sorry about the way we reacted to you?
They haven't outright said anything. They haven't outright apologized. But some have made really, really big efforts to send me cards or to, reach out or to say something. The one family member who really, really disowned me the most, I was 15 years old and she was, because the abuse went on for 4 years. I was 15 years old and she was writing me letters and leaving me voicemails telling me she didn't love me anymore and I wasn't her family anymore. Her and my mom have started to reform a relationship, and I'm really, really happy about that. Because I don't want my mom to be holding on to, because forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you, right? Because when you hold on to anger and resentment and all that, it's poison, right? And holding on to poison just hurts you. So I'm really happy my mom is kind of reuniting with all of her siblings, and I feel like I'm at a healthy place where I can see them and it's fine, and I still have my boundaries, because I don't think forgiveness and boundaries are, the same thing. But I think people realized that they messed up, but no one has specifically come and said, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I always find it a little interesting. And the reality is that when these events, when these abuses come to the surface and people know about it, no one knows how to deal with them. implode, and what you see is generally they're hanging on to denial because they won't refuse to give up their belief system, which is what that's about, is that they will respond from ways that shock you and shock everyone around them. But it's because, and it's an interesting it's an interesting concept, because a lot of victims end up having to sit across the table from their abuser at Christmas time, and nobody else in the room even knows. So that's another layer of, trauma that happens for people, because they got to keep, they believe they've got to keep the pretense up because they don't want to lose the family, or they don't want to be part of breaking the family up. So
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the way that everyone found out was totally by accident. And it wasn't something I was trying to tell them. My mom, I was so depressed. I was cutting, I was doing drugs, I was a train wreck. And she took me and got this big, long psychiatric eval. And I remember I had to answer all these questions and all these questions. And there was one very innocent question just in the middle of them all. And it was, have you ever had a sexual experience that you didn't want? And it's the way it was phrased was just so innocent. And it was like, if yes, by who? And I wrote it, and then she got a copy of that. And she read through the whole thing. I mean, my parents did a lot to help me through that as well. So
what would you...
I just want to speak to, sorry, I just really want to speak to what you were saying before, is the way that people react. I don't hold anyone, I don't have any animosity towards anyone anymore. Everyone's just doing the best they can with what they have at the time, right? And everyone's on their own journey, right? Everyone's on their own soul path, and we all have soul contracts with each other. And I don't blame anyone for the way that they reacted.
That's a good place.
I'm sure they would redo it again. If they could do it over, they would do it differently. But I really, at this point in my life, have zero anything negative towards any of them.
And what was your first reaction to forgiveness, and where did that take you? When you're coming through your journey, because what happens is, and regardless of the type of abuse, you know what I mean? Even the smallest infractions, there's a point where we either forgive or we cling to the resentment or the blame or whatever. So what was your first reaction to forgiveness, and how did you get to this point?
I think my first reaction was, are you kidding me? I'm not going to forgive them, because, and it's such a human reaction, right? Because we think that in order to forgive someone, we need to demand an apology. And oftentimes forgiveness means that we have to forgive someone without receiving that apology, like we were just talking about. And, I think what really got me to this point was, I've done a lot of work, and I write about this in my book a lot, on releasing repressed emotions and feeling all of those repressed emotions. And it took just getting all of that junk out of me. And I think that's where trying all these different healing modalities and doing all of these things, and I don't know that it was necessarily one specific modality or one specific exercise or anything. It was just like this compounded events throughout my life, and it was just,
well, that's your journey, isn't it? All that is that journey. So I call that getting the jigsaw pieces together.
I like that.
Then, because that's what you're doing, and everybody's journey is unique. And I like when you said that is to get it out, like to whether write it out or say it, because at least then you can see what it is you're dealing with. And you got to do that piece by piece, and that's you're building your own stepping stones, your own scaffolding to come to the place that you're at, where you feel content with yourself. Because I'm looking at I wrote a bit about forgiveness, but not a lot, to be honest with you. But I look at it, the starting point's acceptance, and that's a hard place to get to. It sounds easy because you go, well, there's reality, accept it, but that's not an easy thing to do, is it?
It's not, but I think it's really just about, first it's about letting go of all that junk that you're holding on. And then I think it's really about, what helped me too is shifting my perspective around it. And I think that was really like, it was first getting rid of all the junk, feeling all those repressed emotions. So I wasn't carrying that anger, that guilt, that resentment, that shame around. But then it was how else can I view this, right? And that's where all this spiritual work that I've done has come in, where, you know, we tend to look at people who have hurt us as monsters, right? And we run everything they've ever said and done through this lens, through this filter, and we decide that everything that they've ever done is evil and awful, and they're just this terrible thing in our minds, because it's just how we process it, right? It's how we deal with it. But if you can shift your thinking and start to view those monsters as another being you appreciate, as teachers, then it will completely change your world. Because when someone's your teacher, they're always helping you grow. And there's two ways to do that. The first way is to recognize good things that that person has done for you, right? Ways they've helped you, ways that they've maybe been there for you in the past. They've been kind to you, things you admire about them, or maybe what do other people in their life admire about them, right? Because there's all these different sides to everyone. Everyone has different parts. And if you really can't get there, if you're like, no, everyone hates this person, everything they've ever done is terrible, they're like the devil themselves, then the second way to turn a monster into a teacher is recognize how they've helped you grow, right? Maybe they've taught you how you don't want to treat other people. Maybe they've taught you how to put up better boundaries, or to not take things personally, or to be kind, whatever it is. But if you can start to shift your perspective around it, then your world totally changes, you know?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I work a lot when I'm with victims. I work a lot with getting them to acknowledge their strength. Take it away from the abuser, and here's your strength. For starters, you survived, and here's your point. Here's where you're moving forward. You're actually trying to be of your natural self. You're trying to, I don't like the expression come back, because after we have any sort of traumatic experience, you don't go back to where you were. You learn to live and grow from that experience. So I sort of fix on the strength of the person that's been abused, and get them to really acknowledge that strength within themselves, so that the abuser becomes an event instead of someone that has a big influence on their life and how they feel about themselves. That is never easy to bridge the gap from one place to the other, because the message when you're abused, again, any type of abuse, is that you are unworthy, you were expendable, and you're hit with a force of indifference, and you've reacted to that. This person is completely indifferent to how their actions, or maybe their words, or what their desires has done for me. And for a lot of victims, as you've experienced, is that it cracks the foundation underneath their feet.
It does.
Yeah. And from within that crack, it's like watching, like a little plant grow in between concrete, is that's who you are from that cracking, not actually from the abuse, but from what you did with the cracking. And that's the strength. And then nobody can take that away from you once you understand that. So I see what you're saying with the perception's got to change, but it's, I concentrate on the perception of the person that's been abused, because you've got to come back from that feeling unworthy, and that, a lot of the victims talk about like a shame stain that they feel, and they feel like it's so deep that it's scarred their soul, which as you would attest to, is not actually true. It's just this, I always say it's the big blanket over the top of you, and you can't see underneath. You can't see the truth of who you are. But everybody's got their own unique journey, whether it's spirituality with healing, or just recovery from any type of, trauma. We've all got our own unique path, and it's whatever works for you, and whatever gets you from a point of feeling the despair and feeling, lack of self compassion. Because I think, self-esteem's good, but that's what you pull from other people. Self-worth is knowing that you're valuable, but self-compassion means that you can sit in those dark places with yourself and nurture your way out.
Right.
And it takes a while to get to that point. So, which, you obviously have done with your spirituality, which is beautiful. I like that.
Yeah, and I do need to say, like, this has taken me 2 decades to get to this point,
It's a
right?
very good point.
Yeah, yeah. So, it's a process. And I love everything you said about empowering the victim, right? Because
Yeah.
the way other people behave has nothing to do with you. The way other
No.
people treat you has nothing to do with you. It is about the kind of person they are. It is about who they are. And that's a really hard thing to come to grips with and to rebuild yourself after that. So I think it's all important. It's all part of the journey.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Kris, because a lot of people beat themselves up that going, why can I just let this go and why am I not healed? But it does take a long time, and there are moments, I say every unresolved emotion has layers, and every now and then, I do it myself. I think I've got this all sorted, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh God, here it is again, another layer. And if you trust the process of that, you actually can celebrate that part's coming up. You get excited, okay, because there's growth after it. So when you're stuck in the despair, you can't feel the growth. But after, and it's the sad part is once you've experienced the growth, then you know. But before you actually experience the growth, it just seems like a unattainable thing that people talk about. But it's not. So
Yeah, it's like the world is over, right?
Yeah.
Or you feel so isolated, you think it's only you.
Yeah.
I remember
That's
feeling
a
that
big
way.
one.
Yeah, and then I remember once I kind of realized where all of this stemmed, because I didn't know why I was so angry. I didn't know why I was cutting myself. I didn't know why I was doing drugs. I didn't know I was acting out. Like I didn't trace it back to that. And it's so weird that I didn't, but I just didn't relate it back to that. And then once I did, it was like, oh wow, I'm like this cliche. It's like if you look up abuse victims and how they cope with PTSD, it's like this is a symptom. And it's just like, I was feeling so isolated for so long, but it's like everyone who goes through this has similar reactions, which is just crazy to think about our psychology and how going through something like that makes you react in this way. It's just very strange.
Yeah, actually, I found that with narcissistic abuse is
Mm.
that until I actually learnt what it was, because you're just going, this is unfathomable. What's this? Like I wouldn't treat people this way. What's going on? So you're sitting in that confusion, and then when you start getting, like when you start realizing, okay, this is part of what happens after that kind of abuse, then all of a sudden it helps lay down that foundation, because it does exactly what you said, takes away that isolation.
Yeah, you realize you're not alone.
And you're not, there's not something wrong with you. This is a natural response to what you've experienced. Yeah.
Exactly.
So what would you say is your key pivotal principles around spirituality? Just a little question for you, Kris.
My key, well, I think I've kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'll dive more into it, is if you can change your perception, if you can learn to change your mind, change your belief system, change the lens through which you view the world, then your reality can completely change. Because 95% of our day, we are ruled by our subconscious mind, our subconscious programming. And most of that happens before the age of 7. So 95% of the day you're sabotaging yourself, right? You could be saying all the positive affirmations or manifesting in your journal or creating a vision board or whatever it is, but until you actually get to the root of your programming and you heal the things that need to be healed, you release your repressed emotions, you learn to change your story around the past, all of these things are going to seep into your manifesting. They're going to affect you on a subconscious level that you're usually not even aware of. So it's all about, and there's so many amazing, I love all these law of attraction books out there, because it's helping this mass awakening that's happening, right? It's so many people know about the law of attraction, But the universe isn't this genie in the bottle that you can just ask for and kick back. Like, you have to do the work, right? And that's kind of what you've been saying too. Like, you have to learn to heal. You have to learn to change your perceptions and unlearn a lot of things, right? Undo a lot of conditioning.
Yeah.
So that's really what I focus my work on.
Yeah, I'm so with you, because if you don't do the work, all you do is you're adopting a belief system. You're going to white knuckle yourself to that belief system. It's going to crash. Somewhere along the line, it's going to crash. And it's just really dependent on how good your denial is. And I always say spirituality is a lot about breaking down your denial. You know, like so that those belief systems, you know, you change your mind, change reality. I love the title, by the way, because it is, if you can understand, I always work on the principle, if you understand something, then you do change your way you interact with reality.
Exactly.
If you don't change your understanding, then you react exactly the same way. It might look a little different, but underneath it is actually the same energy. And whatever is whatever's unresolved within you is what you throw at it.
Exactly. And you might make a little progress, but ultimately you fall back into that same paradigm, those same patterns and habits. Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Which hurts. It hurts when you think, you know, like I think there wouldn't be anybody that's been on a spiritual path that hasn't walked down a certain way and done that, you know, clinged on to, jumped on, okay, if this is all I have to do, I can do that. And then, you know,
Positive thinking.
Why isn't that affirmation working? You know, all that sort of stuff. But it's doing the work, which, you know, like I said, when you experience the growth, you end up enjoying it, don't you? You know, like you enjoy, I sometimes really enjoy pulling apart something that I used to avoid, you know, because I know that I'm right. You're in there. Have a good look. So I'm going to ask you the big question we ask all our guests. What do you think humanity needs to acknowledge and understand for us to evolve?
Yeah, I love that you ask everyone that. And I think my answer to that is that we are all in this together. We are all connected. And it might look like everyone outside of you is separate from you, but we're all reflections of each other. We all come from the same thing. We all go back to the same thing. And what one person does on one side of the world deeply impacts what someone else is doing on the other side. Quantum physics has proved this, right, with entanglement. And the way to help heal humanity, to help ascend humanity, to help heal a sick society, to help lift others up is through love and compassion, not through division and hate. And that's why I think things like cancel culture are so dangerous, right? Because the way to help lift up others is by healing yourself and being that beacon and then lifting everyone else up, giving everyone else a lifting hand. But when you go at someone with hatred, with anger, with threats, with lies, with any kind of attack, you are helping bring more of that into the world, because we live in this quantum universe, right? The law of attraction says it too, where it works on an individual level, but it works on a collective level as well. So anything that we are feeling as a collective, thinking as a collective, we are helping to create more of that. There's a quantum canvas, if you will, that reflects back to us everything that we're feeling and thinking. So, you know, the more we feel division between people, the more we attack others, we're calling more of that into humanity. So we need to figure out a way to have unconditional love or empathetic conversations or understanding for our fellow humans. That's my big thing.
Yeah. And I hope we're turning that around that corner and starting to do that. I think we're all getting a little tired of the deception and the division, except the ones that enjoy the division, I suppose. So
I do think that there is an awakening happening. Things have been changing, you know, and as change happens, it's not always a smooth ride, right? There's bumps in the roads, and we've been feeling those bumps. But you know, that was my big hope with COVID. I was like, something good has to come out of this, right? The entire world is going through something together. Like, we're off the streets and the earth is healing, like something we all have to realize. I don't know. I'm still waiting to see if it
Yeah.
affected us in that positive way.
Yeah, I think we're all waiting to see. So do you think that brings up humanity's resilience too when we're having these experiences? When we've come through an event, and one of the things we've got to rely on is our own self-resilience. So do you think you're seeing humanity starting to look at resilience as something of value?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea. I think we're more connected than we've ever been. And, thanks to the internet and technology, we're able to see other points of view online. And that might be a divisive thing, but it can also start to open our minds, start to change our minds a little bit. We're starting to see what other people's lives are like. We're starting to understand that we're more in this as in a collective. And yeah, I think there's a resiliency there. And I think life is always wanting to grow and expand and seek fuller, deeper expression of itself. And that's within the human spirit. So I hope that collectively that comes through as well.
Yeah, I do too. And yeah, it's interesting. So if you're looking at someone that's just starting their spiritual path, what would be your advice for them?
That's a really great question. I would say keep an open mind. I would say it's about doing the work, right? It's not just about thinking positive. And I think that there's so many different paths out there. And the really good ones all have the same message, right? It's about love, it's about kindness, it's about compassion, it's about forgiveness of yourself and others. Definitely yourself as well. That gets glazed over a lot. So I think be open-minded, try all the things, find something that feels right to you, and you're going to find something that feels good, right? You're going to find something that rings as truth. And then you can explore that path a little deeper. But I love reading all kinds of authors. I love attending all kinds of seminars and workshops, because you never know. Oftentimes, I'll say this, oftentimes the people that kind of there's a little bit of friction, they rub us the wrong way a little bit. Oftentimes those people have a lot to teach us, right? So you'll find little gold nuggets everywhere. And so be open to even those ones where you feel a little bit unsure of in the beginning.
Yeah. And I think there's an inner wisdom within everyone, like that, and that's what you're trying to tap back into. And, even, in my book, I actually wrote about a person in a pub or bar for you guys, what you can learn from even those moments, so it's like I love that you're saying be open and let life, I always say life's your greatest teacher, and let it
Absolutely.
teach. Yeah.
And I love that you said inner wisdom, because the really good teachers are the ones that show you that you can heal yourself, that you are your own best teacher, that you are your own guru, right? They're leading you they're showing you how, they're leading you back to yourself. So I love that. And I heard your pub story when I was listening to your podcast before, that someone came up to you. Yeah. I love that. I love when the universe sends you little messengers like that.
Yeah. No, it's and spirituality for me is really just learning to understand yourself and know that you're part of a bigger picture. If you wanted a real quick little sum up, and I love that you're promoting doing the work, because that is the only path, really. How you do the work and where you find the information from, that's unique to you, but you don't come into a self-understanding without actually doing the exploration.
Exactly. You can, and that's the thing, you can read all the books and you can attend all the things, but if you don't put it into practice, if you don't then turn that lens inwards, you're only going to get a shallow experience.
That's right. We want those deeper ones. They're the fun ones.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think we're ready for Flip the Book. So would you like to play?
Sure.
Sure. So there's 3 books, so you can pick 1, 2, or 3.
Okay. I will pick book number 2.
So that's what we refer to as the big book, and you've got 1 to 430 pages to pick from.
1 to 430. How about 428?
420.
I don't know why that number just feels really good. What book is it? Do we get to find out?
Sorry. It's your Insight and Awareness book. So it's Your Life is an Exhibition to Discover the Truth Yourself. So it's a book of concepts. It's my first book, and it's really, as you would know as an author, your first book's always it's the one you put a lot of effort. Well, you put a lot of effort in all your books, but it was my journey tracked. So, but it's designed that you can just open it up randomly, read a paragraph, and the idea is then for you to explore that paragraph within yourself. So that's why, yeah. So you've actually got 1, 2, 3, 4, 9 paragraphs to pick from.
I love this. How about 7?
7. So what is actually interesting, because you've gone to the glossary, and that's good. We don't mind that. So autonomous, and the meaning that I've got here is self-governing, to make decisions freely and independently. So how does that feel for you?
I think that kind of ties in really well to what we've been talking about, of empowerment and understanding that you are powerful, and what other people say and do is about who they are and not you, and looking inward and doing the work. I think it resonates. What do you think?
Yeah, I like it too. And I think you really do feel that within yourself.
Yeah.
Is that you are the one that can change your mind, so therefore you are the one that can change reality. And then that you're taking accountability and responsibility for you, not everybody else, just for you.
Exactly, because you can't change the outside world, but you can change your thoughts, your reactions to things, right? Whether you respond or react. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, just out of curiosity, I'd like to do a soul read on you. So that's, because the books go in random order. So, so today it's book 3. So can you pick a number between 172 and 215?
How about 181?
181. And that is actually a picture.
Oh.
No, I think that's very relevant too. Can you see that?
Oh, wow. That is so relevant. That's crazy. It's crazy because I even use the term climbing out of that proverbial tunnel.
There you go. Oh, I'll tell you something else that's interesting. Just for our listeners, it's a picture of a lady down a well, and you can see into the well, and she's climbing up a ladder, and it's got unconditional love. So truthfulness, compassion, kindness, acceptance, and hope. And she's climbing out of the pit. I normally do 189 to 215, and I said 172 for you, which is the beginning of that section, so that it actually broadened out to what I normally did. So wow. that there, I think the picture epitomizes what you've done and what you've written about, which is beautiful.
I have serious goosebumps right now.
Okay, so would you want the page before or after, and we'll get you a paragraph?
Let's do the page before.
Before, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 to 5.
Let's do 5.
5. When you explore and embrace your own core essences, you can create a ladder to climb out of your emotional hole, a harness to support you whilst in the midst of confronting experiences, and a soft, comforting blanket that warms and shields you from the coldness you observe and feel. To climb out of an emotional hole, you have to be prepared to acknowledge and use the ladder you create with your core essences. You may find the first rung easy, but fear moving to the second rung because you have to step away from what has become familiar. It is imperative to acknowledge what has become your familiar and to realize familiarity does not always create safety.
That's pretty amazing.
I love that. I think
I
it's
have chills. Wow. This is your
yeah,
book too?
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
This is sorry. This is from Breaking Free: The Chains of Silence. So when I started working with people, it's not my history, but about 70% of my clientele ended up being childhood abuse victims. So I always say that they educated me, and then I documented the themes that they were dealing with. And at the back of the book, which is, I'm going to do something similar in my next book, it's about your soul. So, you know, it's got information that you need to help resolve your abuse. But at the back, it's like, right, let's understand yourself as a soul. And that's what we just did for you, so that there's your journey. And then, yeah, it's beautiful.
That's
So,
amazing. And I love the language that you wrote too. It's a harness and it's a soft, comfortable blanket. It's all those things, right?
yeah.
It lifts you up, it supports you, it protects you, it keeps you warm and insulated. I don't know. It resonated on every level. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we love that. So when you wrote your book, how did you find the experience for you?
It was so cathartic. It was so cathartic. And, you know, I always say that the best way to learn something is to teach it. And I've been a teacher in multiple capacities. I taught English. I tutored foster kids. I taught yoga. I taught yoga teacher training. I'm a life coach now. And in every single one of those, I learned that the more you teach, the more you really understand the information you're sharing, because when you have to know how to explain it, you just get it at a deeper level. And it gave me such greater understanding and compassion and gratitude for not only my own journey and everything I've gone through, but all these other teachers who I hold such reverence for and all of their teachings. Because I reread all my favorite books before it. And I don't know, I just came out really embodying the work on such a deeper level after.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
I have too. Thank you so much for having me. This has been really wonderful.